This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Morning, Michael.
Sean, our weekend show is all about the two of us each nominating what we think is the biggest business story of the week and the most remarkable business story, a sleeper story, which is always a great deal of fun, trying to find a story that's going to be bigger later or is not getting the attention that we think it deserves. And then also a very subjective category. Our last one is the favourite story of the week, and really anything could win that. And it is a competition, and so every week we are joined by a judge to help us decide who is going to be victorious. Last week it was me. Just thought I'd remind you of
Drop that in.
Our judge, of course, is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Adam, are you going to actually do a bit better than last week? I mean, giving Michael a win after months and months of losses.
I earned that.
You did. You did. How about then, since you did earn it, why don't we make a rule here? The winner from last week gets to go first.
Oh.
So, Michael, I reckon you get to go first, keeping in mind the Joseph rule. You get to go first on what the biggest story of the week is.
Thank you, Sean. And
Preemptive strike. I love it.
No. This is not a preemptive strike. This is a stitch-up. That's what this is. Did you notice the casual reference to the Joseph rule, which was, of course, the Joseph intervention? A listener by the name of Joseph who complained that every week the biggest story was the economy and therefore we weren't allowed to do the economy anymore. And so Sean, I suspect, knows exactly what I'm doing because the biggest story this week is an economic story, and I'm doing it.
Oh, what a surprise. I mean, I do seem to remember last week the Joseph rule was enacted on me and I lost points. Keep that in mind, Adam. Go on, Michael.
Will do.
Well, but the problem is that Joseph always said you can't do the economy overall because the economy is always going to win. I'm not talking about the economy overall. I'm talking specifically about jobs.
Oh, that's not part of the economy. That's not part of the economy. Good point.
I didn't say it's not part of the economy. I said I'm not talking about the overall economy as the biggest story. I'm singling out jobs because I'm going to make a big call right here and just say the post-COVID era of ultra-low unemployment is officially over. It might be a little bit of a stretch to say it because historically it's still actually very, very good right now. But I figured that I needed to start with a bit of melodrama or something just to try and get kind of Adam across the line. The unemployment rate, though, does no longer have a 3 in front of it. It jumped from 3.9% to 4.1% in January. This is now the highest level in 2 years. It was a bit worse, actually, than economists were expecting. There was virtually no jobs growth last month. Hours worked were lower for the third month in a row, and the number of underemployed Australians rose to...
I reckon Adam's an underemployed Australian, just quietly. Underemployed, say not working the number of hours you want. Adam, seriously, what do you do apart from judge us and be nasty to us? I reckon you could be underemployed.
Well, I like to think of that alone as a full-time job. It gets all of my passion, that's for sure.
Fair point. Go on, Michael. I've been put in my box.
Oh, well said. As I was saying, the heat obviously has come out of the jobs market from the record lows that we did see post-pandemic, and the unemployment rate is likely to keep rising. It's forecast to get to around 4.5% mid-year. So what does it all mean? Of course, as we discussed throughout the week on the podcast, that overall it is still a pretty good number. It's another sign, of course, that the economy is slowing, that interest rate rises have done their thing, and markets are now expecting the first interest rate cut by the Reserve Bank in September, and a 60% chance of another cut, a second cut in December. And just quickly, while I'm on the topic of jobs, and this is all tied into the one thing, it is all still jobs related, a very quick mention of one sector where we're seeing enormous jobs pressure at the moment. We know there's been a lot of job losses already in the battery metal space, particularly in Western Australia, but it could be about to get a whole lot worse with BHP losing more than $300 million on its WA nickel operation in the December half because of an oversupply of nickel on the global market. It is now considering mothballing its nickel business. And the reason I'm mentioning this
what has this got to do with your main story? Go on.
Adam put you back in your box before. And I insist you stay there. wait while I finish this, because it is in the context of this unemployment rate rising, and suddenly we see some of these big hits coming, and there could be one coming in the shape of BHP mothballing its nickel business, because that would put 3,000 jobs at risk. That is one company. Huge. So clearly, single biggest piece of economic news this week, very worthy, very serious contender for biggest story overall, jobs. Sean. Remember, one story only, Sean. Don't try and combine multiple into one.
I won't. My biggest story of the week is earnings season, of which there are multiple parts, as it turns out. Of course it's earnings season. This is the week that some of the biggest companies in the country have reported. So if we're going by Adam's criteria, which is admittedly arbitrary, economic impact. What is the criteria again, Adam?
Topicality, timeliness,
tick.
Economic impact,
tick.
Subjective bias, my subjective bias, and melodrama, Sean. We like a bit of theatre.
Yeah, no, that's Michael.
Sean, you can't tick all your own boxes. I can just...
Yeah, to Sean, the audience is secondary. It's his judgment that counts.
Earnings season. We had some massive companies come out this week, some of the smaller ones too. Generally, it's been a bit of a surprise, perhaps better than thought. Some of the companies that weren't supposed to do so well, like the retailers, generally have. Others, like the battery metals, which Michael somehow shoved into that last story. So the battery metal company, BHP is much more than that, but you get the gist. Well, they've done a bit poorly. Running through them, Commonwealth Bank, pressure on profit margins, lost about 100,000 home loan customers during the last half year, reckons the economy's ready for a soft landing. Telstra, doing really well in its mobile network, 344,000 new customers. Hurt by some of its other services, though. At Wesfarmers, Kmart and Bunnings are doing okay, not so much Target. Its lithium business, like others in the sector, is in trouble. Goodman Group, the massive industrial property group, well, it had to write down the value of properties. That's what's happening in property land, obviously, but it's getting into data centers. And everyone loves a data center, particularly in the AI world. Its share price hit a record. Treasury Wine Estates reckons it's tough times in the US, including the Snoop Dogg 19 Crimes label. But things are going to get better. It also is holding back some range for China. Origin Energy joined AGL from last week, announcing a massive profit. How about a bit of help for we customers, guys? James Hardie tumbled after saying it was taking time to get the renovations market going again. A bunch more. Massive week for earnings, that one story. And generally, as you can see with the S&P ASX 200 trading, relatively close to record highs, generally it's been pretty good. Adamski.
That's a ripper, Sean. Earnings season mixed. I love that summary with the Commonwealth Bank, pressure on margins, because that's probably applicable to many, many companies. And Telstra, interesting that their mobile's up. Who would have thunk it after Optus had a pretty tough end of the year last year? So they've obviously capitalised on their situation. Incredibly insightful reports that you've given during the week. Great story. On this one, I think Michael has to win. Unemployment affects everybody. And
Michael's face. Michael is more stunned than me.
Which is rare.
Oh, dearie gracious me.
But that, unemployment has been at record lows. There's been so much pressure on employment conditions, on the movement of people to different industries. We're seeing new legislation, industrial relations legislation being proposed. This is incredibly important. And just as that's happening, employment conditions are going down. There was also, bonus points could have happened too, Sean. You and I are loving our economics nerdisms. The NIRU, the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, wasn't mentioned, Michael. Possible bonus points there. But anyway, you did win and well done.
Thank you, Adam. That was unexpected, and I appreciate it. I honestly thought that Sean kind of mentioning 8 of the biggest companies in Australia and all of these other things, I thought he was going to play the system here.
Michael, shh.
So I'm very grateful.
Take the win.
Thank you. You made a fantastic choice. Most remarkable story this week.
Righto, I'll go first on this one, perhaps.
You can go first on this one.
It's the fall and fall of CSL. This was once among the most hallowed companies, but it has had a shocking run since COVID, highlighted this week by a couple of pieces of news that wiped out about $12 billion from its market value. First, on Monday, CSL said it was abandoning phase 3 trials of CSL 112, which is a drug purported to stop second heart attacks. The company has spent about $1 billion researching this drug, and basically it doesn't work. Now, I don't want to be too critical because good on CSL for spending 10% of revenue on research and development. Not many other Australian companies can say they do that. And sometimes the research doesn't come off. But still, the company has made such a big deal out of this one, and to get to phase 3 trials and just have to pull the plug, not good. Then on Tuesday, results day, where it announced a jump in profit, CSL dampened, is the way I put it, its near-term growth aspirations for its Viper iron deficiency and kidney disease business. This is a business that CSL paid nearly $12 billion for a couple of years ago. It's been a great hope for the pharmaceutical company. Alas, generic competitors and changes in budget policy in the US has hit revenue. Now, from about 2005 to 2019, CSL's share price could only go up. It was a superstar. Since then, it's been up and down, but the trend is flat, including a 7% fall over the past year. Let's hope things turn around for this once great company, but it's pretty remarkable just how poorly it's done over the past 5 years or so, as demonstrated by the two big announcements this week. Michael.
That is a good story. For me, the most remarkable story is one that's really grabbed a few headlines because it is a story all about the power of proofreading. And it's about Lyft, Lyft, Lyft in the US, which is a rideshare company. It's basically the number 2 to Uber in the States. And it put out its profit forecast for 2024, and it predicted a hefty 500 basis point increase in its gross profit margin. That's 5%, which is pretty amazing. Sounds pretty awesome. Investors obviously thought it was pretty awesome. They really kind of got on board in a big way. Shares in Lyft soared. The market cap of the company climbed 2.8 billion Aussie dollars. Unfortunately, there was a typo in the forecast. It was an extra zero, and the gross profit margin was actually forecast to grow by 50 basis points, not 500. That's 0.5%, not 5%. And that's pretty bad. And my favorite part, though, of all of it was the CEO's response. He came out and said the buck stops with him, of course, but not exactly those words that he used. He actually said, "My bad," which isn't what you'd want to hear from the CEO of a NASDAQ-listed company, and certainly not what investors, I suspect, would want to hear as the value of that company tumbles back to probably where it should be in the wake of the mistake. He also said, "It's a bad error, but it was 1-0. I don't know whether that really works, because 1-0, as we have learned here, can make an awful lot of difference. And he also said that it shouldn't take away from Lyft's butt-kicking financial performance. Unfortunately for Lyft, it kind of did a little bit. And look, we all make mistakes. We absolutely all make mistakes. I'm sure I've made one once. But I do find it remarkable that a mistake like this gets through when this kind of data would be checked and double-checked and cross-checked and then probably checked again just to make sure. About this part, when the CEO was asked if anyone would lose their job over the mistake, he said the CFO's job was 100% safe. He then added that AI can't write financial press releases just yet, which is probably not entirely reassuring for the CFO.
I think what you'll find, he said 100%, but he meant 10%. He had the extra O once again.
Yes. That extra zero strikes again. Anyway, I just thought everything about this story was great. Just the power of 1-0. Just one measly zero to entirely just send the share price soaring, and the response as well was just amazing. Anyway, that is my submission for most remarkable story this week, Adam.
And it's a ripper, Michael. As much a farce as it is remarkable. And he just kept digging that hole deeper and deeper. Oh, my God, this is Monty Python-esque. On this one, Sean has to win for me because this is so impactful. It's a huge company here, and this decrease in value of $12 billion is absolutely remarkable. The series of issues that have plagued their valuation and share price, it's just stunning. So I have to give this one to Sean this week.
Well, that's a surprise too, just quietly.
Can I make a very quick mention before we go to a break of one of our supporters here at Fear and Greed, Blue Chip Communications. And actually, we should actually mention that that they kind of power financial services companies. They do PR and marketing and things. And we actually all attended a Blue Chip Communication function through the week. And one of their clients, and the thing that they supply us with is Voodoo X Coffee, which I'm actually drinking right now. I searched that entire function room for Voodoo X Coffee, and I did not find any. I mean, I suppose you probably don't serve kind of ultra caffeinated drinks at a night.
You weren't drinking coffee that night, Michael. I'm just sort of, as I was there looking across at you two, neither of you seemed to have a coffee in hand, shall we say.
If there had been one, I would have had that instead. But when all other options were removed, suddenly, okay, it's beer or wine. Okay.
And how good was it? Chris Cuff, Dr. Brandy Cole, and our own Sean Aylmer.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
All were impressive, including Carden Calder.
Yes. You know what they should do next time? I'm going to make a suggestion to them for next year, is actually get Adam up there on the stage to judge the panel discussion. Just to provide criticism and feedback to Sean while he's actually delivering his answers.
I'm up for the challenge.
Anyway, look, we must move on. It is 1-1, which is pretty even. Actually, it's very even. I don't know why I say pretty even. It is startlingly even. We're heading into the break. We will come back in a moment and find a sleeper story of the week. All right, we're looking for a sleeper story. This is a story that's not getting the attention that it deserves, or is going to become a bigger story at some point in the future, which is kind of what I think I'm looking for this week, really, because this one's not a sleeper story if you lived through it this week, but the major power outage in Victoria has a sleeper element to it, right? Because it has exposed just how precarious our power grid is when all the talk has actually been about supply in relation to the transition to renewable energies. Anyway, it started with a huge storm on Tuesday afternoon that brought down transmission lines. The massive Loy Yang A coal power station also shut down. Hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses were without power, some for days, right? So the scale of this was huge, absolutely massive. Now, when we have talked about the power grid in the past, it's often been about supply. We've talked about it on this show as well. It is about ensuring that we have the supply as we undergo the transition to renewable energy, and some of the big polluting power stations going to be shut down, all that kind of thing. That is a major, major challenge, right? Making sure there's actually enough electricity just to keep the lights on. But in this particular case, the Victorian government said there was no problem at all with supply. This all came down to transmission. And then you had Federal Energy Minister Chris Bowen making the point that we are experiencing more frequent and more extreme weather events now, and that this event shows how critical a resilient and modern grid is to give network operators the options to divert electricity around different parts of the grid, and also nationally to divert it between states as needed. So really, there you have it. Not only here are we facing challenges over the next decade of making sure the supply is there, which everyone has been focused on, just this basic need to keep the lights on as we shift to renewables. We learned this week just how precarious our grid is and how vulnerable it is to something as basic as the weather. It is a sleeper because once the kind of the crisis part of this is over, the focus is really going to shift to future-proofing a vulnerable, evolving system and making sure that the Sean, you're smiling at me. Making sure that the electricity grid of tomorrow doesn't just have enough supply, but it actually has robust enough transmission lines and grid stop smiling, Sean. You've thrown me off. I was about
No. It's I had never heard about the transmission lines and grids and that, and the need to make sure that that's stable. It's total news to me, mate.
I need to not look at you. I'm just going to close my eyes when I'm talking from now on. Like you have this ability to put people off just with one eyebrow. You're like, Anyway, so look, it is a sleeper story. There's a sleeper element to it because everyone focuses so much on supply. I'm talking about transmission, and into the future, we need to make sure that we have a robust Stop it. Okay, I'm out. I'm done.
Oh dear!
Quick finish to that story.
That was a very quick cut. Maybe the consumer's back and no one really realises it or mentioned it. Consumer sentiment this week, the Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Survey rebounded to a 20-month high as the outlook for interest rates went from rises to falls. At least the next move everyone thinks will be down now, not up. The Consumer Sentiment Index is now at its highest level since mid-2022. It's rebounded from really low levels. So it was at levels normally associated with a recession. But consumers are happier about the outlook for rates. Generally, they like the idea of the rejigged Stage 3 tax cuts. Around 2 in 5 consumers still expect another interest rate hike, but 1/4 think the next move will be down. The biggest risk to the economy at the moment, bar nothing, is household spending. What are consumers going to be doing? If they are feeling better, then maybe it's just not as big a risk. Now, you can't really say consumers are back yet, and this is why it's a sleeper story. You can't just come out and say, wow, one good consumer sentiment reading, things must be much better. But if you look at the retailers reporting this season, along with the consumer sentiment jumping, all the rates talk, it's just kind of interesting. I'm just wondering whether it's a portent for where the economy is going. An excellent sleeper story.
Michael, very significant story this week, but not a sleeper. We have been aware of this risk for some time. It has happened before. So very impactful to those people, but I just can't give you maximum points for this category, whereas Sean, maximum points. The consumer sentiment here from 81 to 86, we know that 100 is neutral. Record lows have come off 5 points in a month for the hopes of interest rates stopping, or interest rate rises stopping and maybe even coming down. The Stage 3 tax cuts coming through in July. This good news has been received so quickly. That's 5 points in a month. That's massive. And at the same time, business confidence has gone up a point too. So this is from really tough or perceptions of tough challenges to much better. And for me, that is a big sleeper story. Consumption is 60% of the economy, and this will impact that.
I wish I'd said all that when I actually did the thing that I did, like rather than just waffling on. And you gave it a little bit of grunt, and I appreciate that, Anne. Thank you.
Let's move on to the favourite story of the week. I reckon we just scrap the sleeper story category entirely for the future. I think it's just...
One day you'll do a good one.
Oh, slightly condescending, Adam. One day, Michael, you'll grow up to be a big boy.
Maybe you could one day win one if Sean's away. Favourite story, Sean, what's yours?
Well, this week's Super Bowl brought in the largest audience ever for a single US network, with 123.4 million viewers, according to CBS. That was up 7% from last year's game. Probably the largest viewership ever, though the Apollo moon landing in 1969 was estimated to have drawn a TV audience of between 125 and 150 million in the US. Now, the population then was about 200 million, so obviously, proportionally, that was much bigger than this game. But still, we're kind of in the same realm. Kansas City Chiefs beat the San Francisco 49ers in overtime. What I love about this, though, are some of the numbers that emerged from it. And this is a Taylor Swift free commentary here. $7 million, that's US dollars, what's that, about 11 million Aussie, for a 30-second ad. And 50 advertisers had lined up to do it. Average ticket price, $14,000. It was estimated to be the second highest eating day of the year, behind Thanksgiving. About 8 million pounds of guacamole apparently was consumed on Super Bowl Sunday. The NFL doesn't pay bands for performing at halftime. Usher, yes, that was the halftime act. No one cared because that other person was there. Yep, didn't get paid. On average, 120 footballs are used during the game. Where? How? Why? I don't understand. But my favourite number, 16 million people were expected to skip work the day after the Super Bowl on what's known as the least productive workday in the year in the US. Wow. Talk about some great numbers out of a sports game. Easily my favourite story of the week. Michael.
You mentioned the moon landing, Sean. So that was shown across multiple networks, I'm assuming, because this was, if the Super Bowl was shown on one.
Yeah.
So no one network had like exclusive moon landing rights. Can you imagine the negotiations with NASA?
When would they go to the ad? Neil Armstrong is just taking one small step. We'll be back.
We'll be right back.
Doritos.
Yeah.
They'd come back from the ad and you'd just hear the word mankind. It's like, what did he say? What did he say?
Oh, gosh.
Anyway.
And my favourite story this week is all about love, actually, because I am a romantic at heart. And it may surprise you both to learn this, as it seems are many Australians who this week, they've forked out more than $450 million on Valentine's Day. Yes, it is shamelessly commercial. Yes, it's a pretty arbitrary date. But I'm thinking of the economy here at last. A tidy little injection of $500 million in spending, flowers and chocolates and fancy dinners. This is just what the economists ordered. How about that? Isn't that nice? And though the breakdown of who is spending money is actually particularly interesting because you've got millennials spending the most on Valentine's Day gifts. Can you believe this? $334, according to Compare the Market, who did the research. $334 was spent by millennials. Gen Z spent $185. Gen X, $142. Baby boomers, $20.
A card.
Yeah. So you go from $334 for the millennials down to $20 for the baby boomers. Maybe the baby boomers just see through it all for what it is. It could be worse, though. Imagine those baby boomers living in India where they'd have to suffer through not just one day, but a whole Valentine's week, as we discussed earlier in the week, where it starts on Feb 7. Who comes up with these days, honestly? February 7, Rose Day. Propose Day on February 8th. February 9, Chocolate Day. 10th is Teddy Bear Day. Promise Day is on the 11th. What are you promising? February 12 is Hug Day. Kiss Day is the next day on February 13, and we all know what comes next on February 14. It's Valentine's Day, of course. So much tension, so much build up to the big one. And of course, it's massive business in India with gifting platform FNP delivering 350 roses per minute, which is just extraordinary. A great stat, that one, Sean, that you found for us this week. But finally, of course, I cannot talk about romance without mentioning the biggest romantic of them all, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese proposing to his partner, Jodie Hayden, on Valentine's Day. They had Italian at a Canberra restaurant where, according to the owner of the restaurant, the PM bounced between an excitable and a pensive attitude. The owner said that he clearly had a lot on his mind. Then Albo proposed on a balcony at the lodge. Isn't that nice? Isn't that sweet? Just doesn't need a big kind of public display of affection. Just does it nice, quietly, just the two of them. No big grand displays. Though it did make me wonder about the guest list for the wedding. Would you have to include all the world leaders? Would Joe Biden come? Would the king come? Like health permitting, all of this kind of stuff. That would be spectacular. And then even more spectacular, the potential for Albo to DJ his own reception, which would be super awesome. There we go. That is my favorite story. My favorite story is all about love.
Richard Mercer, love God.
Adam.
Okay, it's good. Michael, the number spent $450 million on presents is actually down on prior years. It's becoming...
No. Can I jump in here? Adam, don't bore the rest of us by starting to bring economics into this. Just give the points to the big fella here. Like, you know, the PM's getting married. There's love in the air. I love my story. Don't get me wrong. I think it's the best story ever, blah, 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 blah. Give it to the big fella. He's a lover, not a fighter.
No, can't. No. Economic impact was low. So I'm afraid on the favourite story, the massive Super Bowl wins for the week. Included in that, Sean, I didn't know that artists didn't get paid.
You know, I didn't know that either.
Really? Because I imagine they stick that investment all into the production. It was amazing. I loved Usher. I thought he was terrific. But Super Bowl has to win for my favourite story of the week too. Record crowd, incredible game. It literally was watched around the world, and there was Taylor watch going in and around it. So just spectacular.
Why do you hate love, Adam?
I don't hate love.
All right, give us the points overall, please, Adam.
All right, Sean had a belter in this 3-1 victory, 95 out of 100. One with maximum points, the sleeper story, like honours for that. And Michael, 87 points.
That is what Donald Trump would call a landslide.
Yeah. I'm the Nikki Haley of of Fear and Greed. Why do I even bother? Okay, all right, good stuff. That was an enjoyable contest. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great weekend.